Welcome to episode 296 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with Sydney Sixers GM Jodie Hawkins about the Big Bash, hub life, and winning.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who's out with an injury again, but can still podcast, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and I am nursing a little bit of calf soreness, but that means I'm getting out and about, so that's always good. Super thankful that sports are starting to return to Melbourne. I've been lucky enough to go to a few games in recent weeks. I hope sports are starting to return in your part of the world. As always, you can find me on all social media platforms at Sean Callanan, on most of them, or at Sports Geek. Please send us a message if you are a listener to the podcast, and you can contact me the old-fashioned way. Sean at sportsgeekhq.com is the way that you can do that. Before I get into my chat with Jodie Hawkins, just a quick update, bit of an esports update. Gravitas is back. The new league, the LCO, as discussed with Chris Greeley, the LCS commissioner, a couple of weeks ago, kicked off last week, and it was great to see the Gravitas squad get the W against Legacy Esports, last year's champs, by the way. The roster has completely changed, but we'll take the win nonetheless. Please go to gravitas.gg if you're looking to watch and follow the LCO. Get on board the Gravitas train. Also, shout out to my Patreon subscribers. Really do appreciate you supporting what we're doing in the sports business content space across podcasts, newsletters, and Zoom calls. You can sign up for as little as $4 a month. And remember, we have now got the ability to do it annually, so you can sign up and get a discount as an annual subscriber. So please check it out. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. In this chat this week, I chat with Jodie Hawkins. She is the general manager of the Sydney Sixers, a Big Bash franchise, which is cricket, for people who do not know what the Big Bash is. They recently completed their season. I spoke to the head of Big Bash, Al Dobson, before the season started, moving into a rolling hub and all the challenges of borders closing and trying to get a season away. It was successful, so it was great to catch up with Jodie post her hub life, spending 60 days on the road effectively, and the challenges that were around that. So here is my chat with Jodie Hawkins from the Sydney Sixers. Very happy to welcome Jodie Hawkins. She is the general manager of the Sydney Sixers, the current Big Bash champions. We'll talk about that shortly. Jodie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Great to be here.
First of all, before we get into your latest exploits and all the victory and everything associated with the last season of the Big Bash, I want to wind the clock back and ask how you got your break and start in the world of sport.
Oh, yeah, it seems like a lifetime ago now, but I studied PR coming out of I only have a diploma in business, majoring in PR and marketing.
Yep.
So I did a couple of gap years after high school and then decided PR was the area that I wanted to work in. And I'm not a big believer of the fact that you probably need a degree for PR, which is effectively being able to talk about things and sell them. So I moved into tourism. I started off in tourism, so I worked casually at Bridge Climb back in the day and then moved into the PR department. So I was there for a couple of years, and it was probably through organising. I used to help organise different personalities to come in and do climbs and look after all that sort of PR-y type stuff. And I got linked into sport that way. So I started working with sporting clubs. Obviously, they wanted to do different things on top of the bridge. We use them as well for when we were launching products. And sport's always something I've really enjoyed watching and being involved in. Not much of a sports person myself, but really always enjoyed going to games, being part of the atmosphere. And so when it was actually Bonnie Hindmarsh left the Parramatta Eels to have her and Nathan's first child, Archie, she rang and said, would you be interested in applying for this role? And I did, and I started my career at the Parramatta Eels. So I was there in a PR role, moved into an event manager role, and then after a year transferred over to the Sydney Roosters, and I was there for 4 years doing their media and PR. in probably the most interesting of circumstances. I definitely learnt a lot during that period, but that was during the notorious 2009 of 12 off-field incidents and 5 on-field wins. But really good grounding to learn how to work with media, how to work with athletes, and what the professional sports setup looked like. So that was really, the NRL was really my first taste of sport, and have loved it ever since.
And I think that's probably, I think that's when we first crossed paths, probably at an NRL Digital Day or at a conference around 2010, 2011. And it was sort of when media and PR was starting to move into the digital space, and that role started to shift, and you started to, I guess, widen your scope to go from traditional media and comms and, calling up journos and putting out fires and dealing with athletes doing silly things. And you're like, oh no, now they've got new platforms to do silly things on. Like, what was that as that role emerged and I guess evolved as digital came into play into your role?
Yeah, and it's been really interesting because I think some people look at them as two. They look at social media and the website as a completely different department to communications.
Yep.
And I think I've always held the belief from very early on that it is a stream of communications. How you deal with your own channels versus how you deal with more traditional media channels. They're all part of the one strategy, even though you deal with them differently. And I know some clubs over the time decided to channel everything into their owned channels at the expense of what they did with traditional media. But I feel the true balance is being able to get that right, really being able to utilise traditional media to draw in new audiences. You should be using traditional media to speak to a full fan base and to potential new fans, whereas you use your existing owned channels to really keep your rusted on fan base engaged and give them a really different perspective. Very rarely should you be putting like-for-like content out to traditional media and on your owned media, unless it's obviously the notorious old media statement around some sort of issue. But using a different tone of voice, using it for different purposes and building those strategies together are really important to make sure that you're really making the most of all of your channels of communication.
Yeah, I mean, it is like I'm always interested being in that early stages of who starts driving those channels, and Real Madrid's their social media comms were managed by the IT team for the first couple of years because the IT guys goes it's computer based, we're running it, whereas you have others that are very much in the media comm space or the marketing space, and it is always interesting. I think everyone has converged to, yes, they're a valid channel and there is a bit more, it's a bit more across multiple departments. But early on, there was a bit of empire building by people going, oh, we want that. That looks like a shiny new thing. Yeah,
and just even over time, I think like IT people, obviously their process is around process. So the way they activate, and we talk about this a lot at Cricket Australia, is, the IT people obviously have a place involved in the development of any sort of technology, but at the end of the day, you need to have the customer at the centre of the experience. They're the end user.
Yep.
But by leaving process people in charge of that sort of communication technology, you leave yourself open to really not being able to utilise those channels to the right level. The Big Bash is definitely one where we've even moved away a little bit from websites. So our website is the home of information, but it's not our key engagement tool. Our key engagement tool is very much social media. And how we communicate through those channels and having very specific channel communication strategies because each platform's a little bit different as well, so that even the days of going copy and paste everything on the same stuff on all channels doesn't work. So you need to use the channels to their strengths and what the audience wants on those sorts of things. But even just in the last 10 years, the evolution from using, everyone used to drive everything back to a website. Being able to, use each channel natively and engage with fans that way is really important.
Definitely. You've mentioned cricket a few times. So you went from the Roosters to Cricket New South Wales and the Sixers, and we were effectively rivals. I was working at the Thunder when the Sixers and the Thunder, and effectively for those who don't know, when the Big Bash was formed, New South Wales effectively cut in two. Sydney Sixers and Sydney Thunder, and I was working with the Thunder team at the time. What was your impressions of that, those early years of the Big Bash?
We had no idea what we were doing, but we were having an awful lot of fun doing it. And that's what the Big Bash is about. So it was a new product. It was weird because Cricket New South Wales, they obviously own both clubs.
Yep.
They hold the license to both clubs, but we were really separate. The Sixers and the Thunder were really separate. We were based at the SCG, but we weren't even in the Cricket New South Wales office. We were stuck in an office, over in the football stadium and working from there. And we almost had nothing to do with Cricket New South Wales. So we're kind of just blindly running around trying to do, all the things that you need to do to set up a league. And I look back at what we used to do in those days and compared to what we do now, and just the professionalism even of that, the administration has changed so dramatically over time, and everyone's buy-in. I think the players at first thought it was some sort of, fun hit and giggle, as everyone calls it.
The gimmick or that nature. Yeah. It really did change. But like in those early years, it was like a pop-up sport. It's like, oh, here it is, Big Bash. And it was that from planning and staffing, right? And, even like your first couple of years, it'd be like, oh, for these couple of months, I'm Sydney Sixers. And, there was staff secondments and that kind of thing too. If we fast forward to it being planning all year round and starting to get and look and feel like, the NRL, AFL clubs that have this year-round planning. Like, how has that evolved? And you've been at the Sixers through a lot of success. Like, the last couple of years and the planning around it, completely different from that. Oh, it's September. Is everyone coming in to look at the Big Bash? Like, and I'm sort of being a comedic version, and no, there was more work to it, but it did have that pop-up nature. Whereas now it's a bit more bedded down.
Yeah, we had 3 matches at the SCG in that first year. So, they were mini events, and that's what you were organising, mini events. It wasn't a season, it wasn't a league, which is what we've evolved into. And I think we saw that the success of it in the first year. I think we probably tinkered with it a bit too much in the second year because we saw a bit of a drop in audience and a drop in attendance.
Yep.
But once we got ourselves onto Channel 10 and we really knew, and Cricket Australia absolutely, alongside people like Andrew Jones, who was part of the strategic force that drove the inclusion of the Big Bash. Good on them for having that foresight to understand that this was a product that was going to serve the purpose that we wanted to serve. And there's a lot of talk about the Big Bash is here to ruin the rest of cricket. It's actually not the case at all. The strategic reason for having the Big Bash is that the fan base of cricket was getting older and it wasn't being replaced at the top of the funnel by young kids. So we laughed that we're the gateway drug, but we are the first introduction for people to cricket. They're not meant to stay with us forever, but they're welcome to. But we needed to get young people back loving cricket, and we couldn't do it through Test match cricket because of, you ask people about cricket and they automatically think 5 days might not end in a result. Why? They don't necessarily appreciate that, the battle that Test cricket is. But we were like this cotton candy kind of league that came in and just where people had a great time. We have a strategic purpose as part of our league, but over time we've realised that actually how critical that strategic purpose is to cricket in general, and also the ability of the league to generate income and to provide the states, I guess, with a source of revenue has been really important. So over time it's evolved, and obviously we've seen what it's been able to do from a TV rights point of view.
Yep.
And that's why we extended out to what the league is now, which is obviously a full home and away season, albeit that crazy rhythm where you don't know what day of the week it is. I don't know how many times this summer I've asked, what day is it again?
Yeah.
So, but that's the beauty of it. It's that thing that's on every night in the middle of summer, and people have come to it's become the soundtrack of people's summers. And even this year, the complaining about the length of the season has really stopped. We haven't heard that an awful lot because there were close games. It just seemed to, people really were hungry for sport this year. And there's been some great wins for us this season off the field, not just on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like that early piece was so entertainment focused, and it needed to be, and it was for that strategic reason. And and when you hear, old white man complaining about cricket, it's like, this product's not for you. It's not for you. Like, you can complain all you want because it's, and I talk to mates of mine and goes, yeah, my kids love it. They love going to the game. They love all the theatre of it. They're following the players or they're wearing the cut. Like, that's exactly what it's for. And, when you're seeing other sports, baseball as an example in the US, similar problems, aging demographic, and who's going to watch the next game. Like there's a little bit of, how do we do that? And there was even that trend of T20 and then Big Bash is going so well. We started seeing other sports, building this smaller entertainment for TV sort of products. Some have worked, some haven't. The guys at harness racing trying to do one lap of harness racing. I'm like, I don't know if that works, but everyone was trying to come up with a Big Bash version. You mentioned about the SCG, and that was a big part of the foundation of the teams. How important is to the brand of the Sixers and to the identity of the Sixers is a ground like the SCG?
Oh, look, it's probably one of the most iconic grounds in Australia, and it is really core to who we are. Obviously, the Sixers and the Thunder have this very natural geographic split of Sydney, which is, it exists in every sport, that whole East v West thing. We've been blessed to have the SCG as our venue. It's picturesque. It's really well known, and people do travel from all over the state. And definitely the city to come to a match at the SCG and experience a match at the SCG. I think this year we realised those tier one venues like the SCG really allow you to create an atmosphere that other venues can't necessarily do that in. Venues like the SCG, the MCG, Adelaide Oval, they allow you to trap sound into the venue, which keeps that atmosphere going. And we're really blessed with the SCG to spend a lot of money upgrading PA systems, which are critical to Big Bash. They've got that enormous big screen, again, critical to Big Bash in the way we deliver a match. As a venue, it really is our kind of spiritual home. It's where we spend most of our summer. Our female players train there as much as our male players do. So it really is our home, and we're just blessed to have such an iconic venue that we can be based at.
Yeah, it is a terrific venue with also, it's somewhere you've been for many years, like the Roosters were based there. Like it is a hub of all these different sports teams. I know when I'm, do get to travel, like those old-fashioned things, planes. There's nothing better than going to Azure Cafe and, there's the people from the Swans and then there's the people from the Sixers and the Roosters boys are coming over. So there is that high-performance element too that everyone's pushing each other as well. But, the fan element and I guess the tie to the stadium is critical for your, like, overall fan experience.
Yeah, and that's been something we work really hard on our match days. I think probably we haven't focused on it as much in other sports that I've worked in. And really from the very beginning, the event presentation has been a critical part of what we do with Big Bash. It's not just, we don't just rely on the cricket. The cricket is important and obviously increasingly important. As you build that tribalism amongst your fans, they want to see team success. But for us, the balance is always we need to put on a good show regardless of how the team performs. So we focus a lot because there's only so much we can do. I work with the coaching staff and the high performance guys to build a great list. But at the end of the day, I'm not running out there with a bat and a ball. Thank heavens for that, because I'd be terrible. But our job is to make sure that everything else that happens on a match day has a purpose and entertains the kids. And we often sit there, you talk about the demographic and the target markets. We often sit there and they're like, some of the stuff will be like, I don't necessarily like that. And I'm like, well, are you a mum with kids 5 to 15? Because if you're not, we need to make sure what we're doing is actually delivering for them, not delivering for us. We're not the core demographics. So we spend a lot of time making sure we run what we want to do through the filter of kids, and that it's going to entertain kids. And the most wonderful thing was after the final Saturday, the 6th, a couple of weeks ago, my best mate and her husband and 3 children were there, and they're young kids. They're primary school and under. At 11:30 at night, they were wide-eyed. They just had the best night. That atmosphere just kept them going the whole time, and that's what we want to see. That's what we're there to do.
Yeah, and it's that memory making that sort of starts locking in kids, makes the family entertainment like so in later in the years like that, when's the Sixers games coming back? Like we want to go, we remember that time. So that's really important. And obviously, with your media marketing comms background, that's a strength and it fits really well for the Sixers. But stepping into the GM role, what were the things that weren't in your wheelhouse that you had to sort of get up to skill quick with to learn the different components that is the role as GM?
Yeah, I think there's obviously a lot more financial management at this level. So bigger budgets and the contribution back to Cricket New South Wales and how it all interplays together has been really important and a really steep learning curve for me. Being more strategic has been a natural evolution. I guess you have to start. We talk about standing on the balcony and looking down and making sure that all the pieces, when everyone else is in the weeds, all the pieces are coming together the way that you want to. Definitely negotiating player contracts. I consult with the people who bring the talent to the table. And once we agree, it's my job to go and negotiate that contract. And that was something I was probably nervous about because I've spent a lot of time working with our playing groups as media manager and how was it going to go stepping into that GM's role and really having to negotiate the dollars, which is where things get a bit funny. Yeah. But I've actually found the strength of my relationships has enabled those to be quite decent conversations. There's always a bit of barter back and forward, but I think when you approach those conversations respectfully, as I have, you usually end up with the right result. And I'd say, obviously the proof is in that right now. But I was definitely nervous about it. But yeah, I'm lucky to work with some great player managers as well who understand, the Sixers is about family and keeping the group together. And sometimes that might mean taking a little bit less, but it definitely gets paid back in obviously a great environment and with titles now to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, it is something where you've just got to respect the process and go, even though we're having backwards and forwards here, like we're still trying to recruit you. We still want you to be a player. Like I've just gone through that with recruiting players for Gravitas, and I'm like, we're having an argument here or we're disputing something, but it's like hasn't stopped my goal of still wanting to sign you, and these are the objectives. And it's trying to both impart that message and I guess leveraging that relationship actually helps that part.
Yeah, definitely. But also on the other foot, I've had to tell players they're no longer contracted. And I'm a big believer in you need to be having that conversation with people. You need to be respectful. They've bought into your club at some point or another. And if they're not part of your plans moving forward, you owe them that respect of having that conversation with them to explain why. So it's about being respectful and upfront and just really clear with, why either you are or you aren't signing them. And why, you can afford to pay a certain amount or what else comes with it. Likewise, I do spend a lot of time talking to player managers about, well, this is what our culture's like. So how is this person going to fit into this culture? Because that's very important for me. I can't sit there and tell you how good a cricketer that is technically the way coaches and high-performance staff can. Yep. But my job is also to make sure culturally that we bring people into our teams who are going to add and not subtract from it. Because our culture is really important for both teams, our men's and women's team, but also from a club point of view. And we want people to really be able to fit into that and live those values because if they don't, it can actually have a really detrimental effect on and off-field performance.
I mean, you did touch on, obviously talking about culture there is something that you've been helped shaping in your role for the last 10 years and then effectively the custodian of it now, sort of running things. Like how much is that like interwoven and a bit of secret sauce behind some of the success of the Sixers?
Yeah, I wish I could bottle it, but I don't know how to. It really has been, especially with our men's team this year. And we had a women's hub at the beginning of the summer, so October, November, which was particularly difficult. And looking back, we'd probably handle it really differently because I don't think it helped my group as well as probably the broader WBBL group. I think there's a lot that we've learned from it. Bringing that into the BBL space and just understanding it a bit more and being able to bring the male players on for the ride has been, really, obviously really fruitful for us. Yep. But the culture of that team, the fact that team they're best mates. I kept saying it's like a really weird family holiday because, sometimes you disagree. Yep. You've got some cousin over there that you don't usually see and all of a sudden, you're on the road with them for 65 days, crossing borders and moving your life around. The fact that you could lob at breakfast and anyone could be there and you'd sit and have a chat, the fact that you could go out for dinner with anyone, there was always someone to help at training, there was always someone to help get stuff on and off the bus, on and off, in and out of airports, all those sorts of things. The fact that everyone had each other's back was what got us through that really long time on the road. Given, we faced some pretty tough challenges. We weren't able to play at home. A lot of our Sydney-based players, their partners couldn't come in and see them at Christmas. So we, 3/4 of our players and staff didn't have family in for Christmas. We were in and out of different levels of restrictions and all sorts of things. And if they weren't a group of people that enjoyed each other's company and respected each other, I don't think we would have done as well as we did.
Yeah. So the rolling hub. So I spoke to Al Dobson from Big Bash before the season, just after the women's hub finished, and before he was kicking off with fingers crossed with this rolling schedule. You lived that 65 days on the road, and significant challenges there, like missing our family and Christmas. Obviously, the culture was the fabric that kept the guys together, because it could have just pulled apart, but. Absolutely unique experience to go, we're going on the road for 2 months. And again, for people who don't know, because of different outbreaks, there was no games in Sydney for so long. So, one, you've got the issue of managing your players, and I'm assuming you were on the road the whole time.
Yeah, it was.
Then how also was the difficulty of our poor fans. Like there was a schedule. We will eventually see them in January, and then poor old, Al, due to the reference, had to cross the line. Sorry, Sydney, you're not getting this game or this game. How did you manage that relationship with your fans that would have loved to have seen the games, but it was effectively yanked away from them for most of the season?
Yeah, so we'd already set some stuff up prior to the season starting, because we knew we wouldn't be able to sign autographs. And look, the quintessential thing about Big Bash is you get an autograph from a player after the game. They walk around the boundary and sign autographs. That's what we do.
Yep.
So we knew we weren't going to be able to do that. So we had to find a solution for that. So we had a digital signature campaign where pre-match you were able to text in your information and receive an autograph back. Yep. That was one of the little things that we kind of started with at the very beginning, and we did that at the beginning of the WBBL because that's important in WBBL and BBL. It's a Big Bash thing. It's not a men's or women's thing.
Yep.
So we were really keen on that. And obviously, we delivered the rest of the WBBL in Sydney, and we had some other online interactivity. But when it became increasingly obvious when we knew we weren't going to get back to Sydney, and we tried, we were giving ourselves pretty tight deadlines, to be honest, to move things around, but we wanted to give ourselves the best opportunity to get back to Sydney. But when that became obvious, we just sort of pulled out the list of things we'd been thinking of since the beginning of the season about interactivity. But it's really funny because the cuter you get with it, often the harder it is to deliver and the less impact.
Yep.
The most impact we had, so we did our fan days online, we did a Zoom call, good points and bad points without being able to control everyone's ability to chime in or video on, video off, and all sorts
Sorry,
of things.
you're on mute.
The cat's cry of 2020, you're on mute. But I guess those sorts of things turned out to be really the most impactful. And at the end of the day, the best thing we did was actually get the list of numbers for our members. And one afternoon, we paired all the players up, had them open all their doors in their rooms so that the staff could come in and out, and they sat there and called members for an hour. And it was the feedback that we got after it for something so simple was really powerful. And I think it really showed us that you can do all the cute stuff in the world, but really what we're known for is an ability to interact with our fans on a more intimate level. And what we delivered was that through the simplicity of a phone call. It was really lovely. The boys actually had a great time. I think Steve O'Keefe and Lloyd Pope, who I should never have paired together, but I did because those two are terrible. Spinners never shut up. And I think they got through half their list because they spent so much time talking to people and just having this great conversation. And, that's a memory that those fans and those members, they're always going to have. The fact that a player picked up the phone and called them. And it was so simple but so impactful. And even for the players to hear that, just to hear people saying, oh, yeah, I saw that game like 2 nights ago and I can't believe that you did this. And you kind of forget that people are at home still watching. We didn't realise they were watching as much as they were until we did turn up to the SCG for the final and everyone booed AJ Ty. And we were like, oh no, they've been watching.
Yeah,
They know what's going on. So it's lovely for the players to hear that feedback too, because you can feel so isolated when you're on the road and you're not playing in front of crowds and certainly not playing in front of your own fans. And so to hear that people are still engaging with them also helped them as much as that goes the way of the fans and the members. It provided a really nice boost for our players as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that mental boost for the players, like it's a bit of an ego stroke, but they are used to the pats on the back and the thank yous and the roar of the crowd. And sorry, they haven't had that for 9 months. So, getting on the end of a phone and someone saying how great they are and how awesome it is and how much they've watched it and how they've watched it take the wickets, it's like they come out and they're standing a little bit taller and it's like that virtual crowd is there. So, like, it's like I said, simple execution, but it was two-way. It wasn't just the players sending it. Like the players would have got stuff so much back in spades to fill their boots, so to speak. And then, then the gods aligned for you to have the game. Feb 6. So you probably were watching the Weather Channel pretty heavily leading into that match, considering,
Mom definitely got to work out on my phone.
Considering previous years, there wasn't reserve days and there was thunderstorms, and it's like, and then Cricket Australia said, yeah, we'll have a reserve day. If something goes wrong, we'll have but, got it away. Like, that is the catchphrase of the last 12 months. Did you get it away? Yes, we got it away, right? And you did more than that to have the Big Bash final, to have all the fans there. Like, was it just storyteller ending? You couldn't have written it better?
Oh, it was amazing. And we'd been discussing for a few weeks, what if? So what if Sydney ends up in this position? What if most of the borders come down? I've never sat and watched news conferences as much or checked Twitter to find out what the numbers were at the different times of day that everyone was posting them as much as I did this summer, and especially that 2-week lead in. So coming into the start of the finals, we knew we probably couldn't play the qualifying final in Sydney because there was still too many border crossings, and that's really what stopped us from coming back into Sydney. It wasn't the New South Wales government or the inability to host a match. Yep. It was the fact that we had the multiple border crossings that still needed to go on, and so many teams. And that's the difference between us and the Test match. Obviously, they had 2 teams, 1 border to cross. Yep. Much easier to navigate than 8 teams and multiple borders to cross. So that's why we couldn't get back to Sydney earlier. But then all of a sudden, things were looking really good. The last 3 of the borders came down, so Queensland, Tassie, South Australia. Yep. Aside from WA, obviously, which has been a bit problematic across the summer anyway and across the whole COVID situation. And before Dobbo, Alistair Dobson, got a bit sick of me, was sitting in the dugout in Canberra, and we had the conversation that we wanted to make the call on the final before the end of that match because we didn't want it to be reliant on the winning team. It had to be a decision that was made in the best interest of the fans, and that's how we wanted to make the decision. It was in the best interest of the fans. Yeah. So Dobbo and I had been speaking all day about it, and he's like, I just need to speak to Nick Hockley from CA. He's on his way. So I'm in the dugout in a controlled area. I can't just walk up there and have the conversation. So I'm like, look, and I can't have my phone on me in a player and match official area because I'm not one of the authorised people. And so I'm looking, I can see them sitting there, and I'm like frantically waving my arms. I'm like, I'm here, let me know. And they're like, he was like, hold on. And I was like, dude, make a call. And then probably about 15 minutes later, I stuck my head around the corner then, and Nick Hockley just gave me the thumbs up. And I was like, oh, brilliant, this is amazing. And in the end, it came down to, obviously the Perth players, unfortunately, have had to go home and do 14 days quarantine. They can do that at home. Yep. And they are able to train within their quarantine group. But at the end of the day, it was about making sure Sydney fans were rewarded, and our team, our playing group, were rewarded for being engaged all year. The playing group had earned the right to play in the final in front of their home crowd. Yep. And with things going the way that they were and the other borders falling, it really it became, the Sydney fans deserved an opportunity to watch this team play and to play in a final. Yep. And I'm so pleased that we got home. I'm so pleased that the weather held out because the reserve day was a 10:15 start, 10:15 a.m. start, because a number of players were boarding a plane on Sunday night to go to New Zealand and play for Australia. So
tiny windows of this is the only time it can happen, and this is where the weather it was meant to be.
Yeah, we were driving over the Harbour Bridge because we weren't allowed to stay at home when we got to Sydney. We had to stay in the bubble until Sunday morning, actually, which is why Dan Christian's epic celebration video is in the fresh air down at Kirribilli. But so we were in North Sydney. So we were driving over the bridge and dark clouds above us, but on the horizon was blue sky and clear blue sky, no clouds behind it. And I was like, oh, I wonder if that's coming or going. And a couple of people were tweeting about it. And obviously, until you get to the ground, I've got my phone on me and I'm texting people going, is that blue sky coming or is that like just a mirage and I'm in my mind? And they're like, no, it's coming over. And sure enough, the covers come off once we get there and everything aligns and we miraculously get 40 overs of cricket in and everyone quickly forgets the reserve day.
Yeah.
So, amazing.
Amazing. So congratulations and a very successful 10 years and credit to everyone in the Sydney Sixers organisation. But if they're not a more memorable season, like I don't know what there will be. So like going back to our original question, so what's next? Like, you're only a week or two removed from that experience. How do you start doing some planning for next year? What are some of the things in front of you?
So there's obviously some list stuff that we're working on. So really making sure our women's list is strong moving forward. I think we know we've got a bit of movement we need to sort of make there, and that's already underway. Retaining a lot of our squad for the men's really important. Obviously, from a BBL point of view, we've got an overseas player draft that's been discussed that we really need to probably spend the next month nutting out because to open contracting, we need to understand what that's going to look like. There's some rule innovations that we had in BBL this year that we need to pick over and make sure they're the right things and they had the impact we wanted them to. Does any of that need to transfer into the WBBL and what from BBL land does need to come over? But at the end of the day, we just need to keep making sure that we're true to our purpose, which is to, inspire the next group of young kids to love and play cricket. That's kind of what Big Bash is about. So we need to keep, circling back to that and making sure everything that we do is in line with that. Key for me is bottling what happened in that final and how do we bring that to life regularly. CA have slightly bigger budgets than we do, especially when you're delivering 7 matches across a season. So how do we take some of those elements and really bottle them? How do we learn from our digital footprint this year that hopefully, we hope next year looks a bit more normal, but who knows? You don't know. The vaccine rollout's due to be done by October. That's when WBBL starts. Will we be there? We don't know.
We're still going to be in this weird flex of we will plan for a normal season, but we have to plan for a not normal season and everything in between. And sort of take the best of, this stuff worked, and try to apply it. And, don't want to use the word COVID normal too often, but it's, that's what we keep hearing in all those press conferences we've been watching the last 12 months. So it's trying to get to somewhere that space where it is like a normal summer where, you have got 30,000 people watching a Sixers match and, there's lots of kids and lots of families and lots of fun.
Yeah, and the reality is that there might be some things like we still might not be able to sign autographs for another year. So what does the next version of that look like? It's what worked and what didn't this year from that digital overlay, and how do we dial it up, pick the good stuff out, and slowly bring back some of that, the more personal interactions as we can throughout the year. Because really, without a fan base, without your members, you don't actually have a product. Then you just become a high performance product and an entertainment product. So, we really just need to tap into what worked well and what didn't. And then how do we make sure that we've obviously also come off the back of some really strong ratings. So how do we maintain that momentum into next season, given that we won't be playing any cricket from a Big Bash point of view until October when the women starts and December, obviously, when the men start. So how do we, maintain some momentum there to really make sure some of that stuff that we did this year that worked, how do we dial that up in incoming seasons so that we're not stuck in a conversation about the TV product and that our TV partners are really happy with what we're delivering.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jodie, thank you very much for coming on. I want to finish with the Sports Geek closing 5. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I don't really remember it, but I reckon it was a Dragons match. My dad and brother are Dragons fans. I reckon I grew up in Hurst, so I reckon it was at Cogra Oval. And I do remember just at some point sitting on the hill enjoying a bit of rugby league.
Terrific. You would have been to a lot of different sports events in your time. Have you got a go-to food or a favourite food memory at a sports event?
Look, you can't go past a meat pie. It's probably the only time I ever eat it. And I only ever eat it as a spectator, because when you're obviously either without sounding like a snob, in a corporate box or in with the players, you don't get meat pies, aside from the old mini meat pie at innings break that everyone loves in corporate hospitality. But if I'm going as a punter, I rarely eat them, but a meat pie is my go-to.
Definitely. What's the first app you open in the morning?
It's my email, which is really bad, and it's a habit I absolutely need to break now. So I got into a lot of bad digital habits while I was on the road. So not opening the email first thing and just giving myself time to wake up is my priority this off season.
Yeah, that is good advice, but it is something that everyone has trouble following their own advice, admittedly. Is there someone that you follow, whether it's on Twitter or an author or someone that you read, that you suggest the listeners should also follow, and why?
Look, I love following Elisa Healy on social media. She is witty. I feel that as an athlete, she really uses it to its full potential. She's herself on social media. And I think sometimes you find the athletes that don't use it authentically. And she is definitely someone who uses it authentically. I'm also a bit of a fan of the grade cricketer, but you do need to understand that grade cricket mentality to get some of the jokes, but it is quite funny.
Yeah, I think I actually did some stuff with Alyssa back in Cricket New South Wales. Early training of what is Twitter, what is a hashtag, and it's good to see. It is the authenticity piece. Like when athletes get it and realise how they can use it, and then show themselves and not feel like they have to be a performer or something. Like just be yourself, because they are just. They're interesting themselves, but there's this pressure of, I've got to be funny. And so, no, you're not a comedian. You're an athlete, and you've got all these different interests. And then once they start filling out that picture, they go, I start understanding how to use it. And you're right, she does do a terrific job.
When you've got sponsored content too, it's really, if you're only posting that sort of sponsored content, it can be really hard to feel like you're getting to know that athlete.
Yep.
So even when she posts some sponsored content, obviously the wording has changed to something that sounds more like her. She's just very authentic with the way that she uses it, and I quite enjoy some of her back and forward.
Yeah, well, I'm glad she's never done the please post this Alyssa post, right? Which we've both seen,
and paste.
Yeah, and paste, and we've seen the athlete go, insert city name here, please, and that's all you get. And it's like, okay. What social media platform is your MVP? And you can answer it as yourself, but also put your Sydney Sixers hat. What is the go-to platform for you and maybe the Sixers?
I'd say both are Instagram. We do have a love for Twitter from a Sixers point of view, and Jared Laws, who runs our social media, some of the stuff he does on Twitter is hilarious. He's very good with a Venn diagram, very good with a GIF to respond to something. But for I think for both of us, Instagram really is the MVP. People don't have the attention span they used to have to want to sit and read through things. So being able to tell your story visually is really. Yeah, I probably spend more time on Instagram than any other platform looking at what other people are doing. So photos, videos, people want to see those sorts of things. And I think really Instagram is the MVP of the social media platforms.
Definitely. It is one that does get a lot of votes when I ask that question. While we wrap things up, how can people find you on the internet? What is the best channel for people to reach out to say, hey, Jodie, I listen to the podcast?
So I'm on Twitter. I'm on all of them: Twitter, Facebook. Well, all of them that I follow: Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Jodie Hawkins is my handle.
Yes.
I am on LinkedIn, although I'm not as active as I should be. I have done a few posts of late, but it's not my most active platform. But yeah, Jodie Hawkins is the best place to find me. And I probably spend more time on Twitter and Instagram than anything else.
There we go. Jodie Hawkins, very Australian Twitter. It's like you Australianise your name. It's like I want to do it for both my first name and my second name.
No one wants to type all that stuff out. That's way too many letters in a handle. So
exactly. Jodie Hawkins on Twitter or Jodie Hawkins on LinkedIn. Please let her know that you listen to the podcast. Thank you very much, Jodie. I really do appreciate the time.
Great to speak to you. Thanks, Sean.
Find out more about Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process at digitaltodollars.com. We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon.
Thanks again to Jodie Hawkins, Jodes Hawko on Twitter. Please reach out to her on Twitter. Tell her that you listened to the episode, or reach out to her on LinkedIn and say thank you. I really do appreciate it when listeners reach out to podcast guests and say that they listen. It is a great pat on the back for me, but also for the guests for giving up their time. Before I wrap things up, I wanted to give an update. Last week, I gave a monologue, or maybe even a tirade, on the Australian government versus Facebook fight. At the time, Facebook had turned off the tap to a lot of news media outlets and even a lot of sports pages, and even to a couple of sports digital agencies. So Sports Geek's page was down after that fight. I don't know if my monologue triggered it, but also Gravitas was taken down. Facebook has since come back to the table, or maybe it probably should be said, the Australian government took a lot of the teeth out of the proposed legislation, so that it wasn't just that the government was trying to get Facebook to pay for news content, effectively, like I said, powered by or instructed by or lobbied by big media. It was really some stuff around the technology and the access to the technology. So there was some mentions in the bargaining code around that news organisations need to be informed when algorithms were going to change, and some of the inner workings of Facebook and Google, for that matter. And I think that's the main point that both Facebook and Google were pushing back on. So they have done a few deals to quell that, but effectively they've enabled themselves to opt out of this code. The resolution has happened. In my case, depending where you read, the media will say Facebook back down. In my opinion, the government balked. The nuclear option of turning off all access had the desired effect for Facebook. So we have seen a lot of pages that were blocked and domains from posting, being able to do that. So you can now share episodes like this one with Jodie Hawkins on Facebook. It's now allowed again. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com, and you can also check out Gravitas on the Facebook page, as well as all of those smaller digital operators that were caught up in the fight. So I hope to see potentially some of those smaller, nimble, digital-first publishers actually get part of the revenue split and the money that might flow from Facebook. But I don't believe for a second that any of that money is going to end up in furthering journalism, which was the rhetoric that was pushed forward. So it's been resolved for now. Facebook and media are bedfellows again, but it's still a bit of a watch this space. Australia was definitely used as a case for the rest of the world to not try to force Facebook to do certain things, and I think that was why it was tackled so tactically, I guess, strategically, because they weren't just responding to the Australian government; they were also putting other governments on notice if media orgs were trying to pull the same thing. So that's the update on there. All back to normal 1 week later. I didn't bother putting in any requests to get my Facebook page back. We know how hard it is to get some support out of Facebook, but it did come back. That's it for this episode. Don't forget sportsgeekamplify.com is the series that's going to come out, where we're going to profile some great sports technology businesses on how they're helping sports bounce back. You can go to sportsgeekamplify.com to register to get a sneak peek and to get access to that early. Obviously, the Patreon subscribers will get access to that series a day early as well. So make sure you sign up. Go to sportsgeekamplify.com, or even better, become a Patreon subscriber. As always, if there's a way that I can help you with your sports business and technology and marketing needs, please reach out. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. go to sportsgeekhq.com. That is where you can sign up for the newsletter. You can find out about Sports Geek Amplify, and you can find out for the next Sports Biz Zoom call. That's happening in the second week of every month, so not far away. Sign up for the March one. Looking forward to checking it out, and who knows, we might try something on Twitter Spaces, because it does allow. There are some options there as it starts to become a rival to Clubhouse. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.